So this is a horrible tragedy that only seems to get worse the more we learned about what happened that day. But will law enforcement officers involved be facing legal consequences for their inaction, as it's still debated about what happened or didn't? So let's talk about those questions tonight with criminal defense attorney David Bruno and former FBI Special Agent John Iannarelli. Gentlemen, welcome back. You heard there from Trace's reporting that the head of Texas DPS said the doors weren't locked, that there was equipment and personnel inside the building, that we obviously have surveillance images. John, where do we go from here? Because then you hear the mayor pushing back saying DPS is trying to deflect and blame local police. But how do we wade through this evidence and find out? Because these parents deserve answers.
Well, Shannon, the DPS director is a former FBI agent. He has the same training that we all received in the FBI, and he knows what officers on the ground were supposed to do. People can say whatever they want, such as the mayor is saying, but the bottom line, the responsibility falls with the officers that were there immediately after the shooter entered the building, and it falls upon the shoulders of the on-scene commander, in this case, the chief of police for the school district.
I want to play something from a mother there in the Uvalde community of has at least one child in this school.
More angry that they're trying to cover up a lot of things and trying to hold us back from speaking. Also, just that they should have just gone in there and done their job. Basically, they just didn't do their job.
So, David, whether it's a parent of a child who survived or lost, we can't imagine that level of grief, but they feel like not only was there inaction that day that maybe cost their children's lives potentially, but that there's some type of cover-up or they're not getting the full story. I mean, how do parents, is there a way to sue, to take civil action, to get to the answers about what happened?
Sure. Well, first, I mean, in the report, we just heard that the chief had said that the doors were locked, and there's no video to show that they even tried that door. I mean, I could only imagine the feeling a parent has hearing something like that, because there needs to be transparency. And when you start seeing these videos out, you have to question what they were doing. But the law is not in the favor of the victims, unfortunately. In fact, this recently came up in the 11th Circuit from the 2018 shooting in Parkland. And the decision said that police do not have to protect. Believe it or not, they only have an obligation to victims if they're in custody or in incarceration. But there's a sliver of an exception, and that is shocks the conscious. And the case law says that it has to be a purpose to harm. But I could see a little diversion off that, because if anything shocks the conscious, it's something like this. It shocks my conscience for sure, that they were waiting outside. And if there's a change in the law, and we saw it in the leak from the Supreme Court on abortion rights, there could be a change in the law here. And I think that when police are there, when they go into the building, they have some responsibility to victims, and that law needs to be looked at for sure.
So that police chief, who Trace said is not going to get a leave of absence, or I'm not sure the exact leave that he'd asked for at this point, but apparently that's been denied. There have been reports that he gave earlier accounts saying the doors were locked and that he and another officer actually tried them. Now, in the presentation today, they said there's nothing that they saw that shows that, the exact moment they would have been trying those doors. Here's what the Wall Street Journal says on it. It says the classroom door wasn't locked. That's according to the DPS director. He said police officers armed with rifles and protected by body armor were on the scene within 3 minutes. Even had the door been secured, McCraw said, officers had tools to break it open, yet they waited an hour and 14 minutes to go into the classroom, despite hearing ongoing gunshots, knowing children had been shot inside, and knowing that at least a teacher, one of them who'd been shot, at that point was still alive. John, what do we do with this new information we keep learning?
I'm concerned about the talk that we didn't have a key to the door or the door was locked. Law enforcement trains to breach doors all day long, and that's standard training in these school shooting situations. They had the tools to make entry. They had officers for overwhelming use of force. The objective here, we've learned since Columbine, is to act immediately and save lives. I suspect the officers were stymied by the on-scene commander not letting them to go forth and do their job. We need to learn from this, and people need to be held accountable.
Yeah, David, will they be? do you think?
Unfortunately, if the precedent is followed, like I said, that 18 and the 2018 case, it cites Supreme Court law too. I mean, there has to be something here because this is not acceptable. It is just not acceptable, and I agree with my colleague on screen.
All right, David and John, thank you both. We always appreciate your time.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon.